friends, Jewel back with another super cool astrology video, and I wanted to address the natal placement of Pluto conjunct the IC, so the cusp of the 4th house. This is really the emotional house. It's kind of the basement of the chart, where it's the has a lot to do with the stability. The 2nd and the 4th house have a lot to do with the stability of the chart, the foundation of the chart, and the 4th house is very much our past. It is an internal house. It's an emotional house. It describes the mother, where we come from, our roots, our homeland, our comforts. And so when we have Pluto, which is our difficulties, our repressed things, the things that are very much psychologically controlling us from the back, unconscious things, very much, you think of the 8th house. Underground things, buried things, our ups and downs, our difficulties, our crisis, sex, death, taxes, things you don't want to deal with, attachments, deep, deep, deep attachments. And attachment ultimately means misery. And so when we have Pluto coming into the 4th house, especially on the cusp of the 4th house, Pluto's going to be it's going to be expressed in a very internalized and subjective way, as opposed to having it on the midheaven, where Pluto is very outward and objectified. The 4th house cusp is really where we see our self-validation, as opposed to the 10th house cusp, which is we see our validation coming from things outside of ourselves, our environment and other people, things of that nature. So Pluto here is actually a very complex place. People are emotionally complex just by having this particular placement, because they are not in touch or very conscious or accepting generally of what Pluto is about. Pluto here, it doesn't mix with the moon in a way, and see, the cusp of the 4th house is very much descriptive of the elements of our moon, our unconscious feeling nature, our habitual emotional patterns. So people that have Pluto here don't realize the strength of their power. They can often have a general feeling or interpretation of themselves as more powerless. They do tend to be very stubborn and immovable. Now, we can have a lot of Pisces, Neptune, 12th house stuff going on, and we can see this being somewhat situational. But generally, these are people that do have a large element of immovability in their character. So, it's just a real interesting placement, because the 4th house cusp has a lot to do with the security that we wish to find, as opposed to the 2nd, which is really the security we build for ourselves. The 4th house is the security that we wish to find, the security that we have had, the security that we've experienced in the past. And so that is our idea of what comfort is, and therefore what we would like to have in the future. And so when we've got this one here, we can have the need to make their power conscious, because it's sitting in a place where they're not really in touch with it. Pluto's very well buried on the cusp of the 4th house. And what it does is it makes them have some real issues with invulnerability, number one. And they tend to express a certain amount of power struggles in the context of their private or domestic lives. Other people will generally be the ones that express their own unexpressed power issues, unaccepted power issues. So when it comes to the invulnerability with people that have this one, this really comes from an early experience in your childhood and in your environment where you were strong. The person that has this was, from a very young age, reliable, compliant, helpful, and they generally had some amount of creating their security through being strong. And so when we grow up with this attitude, we don't realize that we're invulnerable, because generally, you know, this has come in before age 5, age 6, because we're dealing with the fourth house. Things in the first are, you know, like 0 to age 1, and then the second house is, you know, before, and as we develop speech at about 2, third house about 3 years old, the fourth house I liken to be about 4 years old, and then the fifth house is, you know, the fifth year. They very much follow this pattern when it comes to human development. So, and I studied a lot of human development in college, so I tend to link the two in astrology. So, we have to make our fears and our insecurities known when we have this particular placement in order to really, truly feel that we can bond or be known in the world. Because intimacy is hard to achieve with this placement because they aren't intimate with themselves. The people who have this, they're not aware of their own issues because they're well buried and well not thought of. So it isn't like, you know, the opposite way of Pluto on the midheaven, where we're kind of always acting out our issues and you're kind of known for those things. We're not with Pluto on the 4th. We're not in touch with our own crap. And so there is a certain amount of crap cleanup that needs to be done with this placement. Inner child work is really important when we have Pluto on the cusp of the 4th, because generally we're not going to be consciously in contact with a lot of the reasons that Pluto is at the cusp of the 4th house. If you ask people about their childhood with Pluto on the cusp of the 4th, they will generally describe it as, you know, there were some struggles, there was some amount of, there's usually power games between the parents. But, you know, generally they do not describe it as some kind of hellish experience, where, as opposed to having Pluto anywhere on the other angles, they generally will describe that hellish experience. They interpret it nicely with Pluto on the 4th. And so we have to get more understanding, more real, or more accepting about what was really going on there. Even if it wasn't, you know, horrible things, there was things going on that were internalized as difficult by the person who has this. So, you know, maybe, you know, we weren't decapitating each other, but we were experiencing some other, you know, level of stress, and, you know, that was enough for the person who had this to internalize that and to have Pluto on the cusp of the 4th house. And so inner child work, past regression work, but be careful you contact with that. Generally, in my opinion, you would want to go to an actual psychotherapist or psychiatrist to do any kind of regression. That's not very well handled in the realm of astrology or psychics. So it's one where we do have to understand why we have developed this element of being manipulatively forceful. Why is it that we aren't in touch with our power? Why is it that we've decided that our power is something that we're going to bury and make nice. So you see a lot of nice, angry people with this particular placement. And they have a low tolerance for pain a lot of times. They are physically sensitive with this placement. Kind of the opposite when we've got it on the midheaven. They tend to be really physically tough. So they've coped well all their lives. And it is that coping mechanism that they really need to let go in order to experience life more freely, because they don't really get how locked up they really are when it comes to their undealt with stuff. And so this is one where we live with a very high internal stress level, and we're good at handling it, and we're good at handling stressful situations outside of us because we're used to, you know, the baseline stress level is actually very high, so they're used to dealing with this chronically. And this is also one where somatic work really helps. Getting the body, the cells, the muscles to release a lot of the difficulties and the Pluto, frankly, the Pluto that we've gripped and held on to in our heart center and in our stomach with this placement. Some kind of psychodynamic work or whatever kind of therapy you're working on in tandem with physical work. Body talk is really good for people who have this placement. Massage along with psychodynamic therapy, or if you're working with a really knowledgeable astrologer or other kind of therapist. Getting the cells to, and the muscles and the bones, chiropractic can also work really, really well for this, to release what it is they're holding on to, because this is really well clung to, the difficulties that we've got going on here with Pluto at the 4th. So basically, where we have Pluto on the midheaven, it demands change, especially from others. And Pluto on the IC resists that and wants to keep things as they are, because it sees that as safe. And getting them to contact their anger, contact all things Pluto, their difficulties, their crisis, is one that can be something that's extremely freeing for these people. It does help to actually control and nullify some of their plutonic, deeply buried yet very controlling plutonic behaviors, when they can finally get in touch with the roots of these things, because the 4th house is our roots. So we have to get in touch with the roots of our Pluto, which is our crisis, our difficulty, our buried things. And you can look to the house that Pluto is ruling, because that will give you a lot more information. Where is a lot of the crisis coming from? Where is a lot of the difficulty coming from? Where did we experience that early on? And do we now recreate this? So it's definitely one where the environment is, the close environment, the intimate environment is closely controlled with this placement. We do tend to be smother mothers with this one. We pay attention to everything. We provide everything. We're very overprotective, whichever parent we are. And as we do more contacting our own trauma and difficulties, parents do tend to let go and allow more freedom and allow things to be more just as they are with this placement, because you know, that personal work is definitely going to bleed out to every other area of your life and affect everybody else and their relationship with you as well. So this is a position basically where we are highly insecure, but we don't realize it. And by getting in touch with what it is that is yet undealt with, creates that sense of security that they're trying to achieve by not contacting and really consciously bringing up what it is that makes them insecure. So very psychologically complex placement, and definitely does not show like other Pluto placements. You can see Pluto on the midheaven, you can see it on the ascendant, and you can hear it when it's on the descendant. When it's on the IC, it generally goes more unnoticed. But if you watch them closely, you can see this subtle, covert manipulation that does play in the background of their lives. So I hope this was helpful. If it was, please subscribe to my channel. You can find me on the internet at truthandaspectastrology.com, Facebook, Instagram, other social media at Truth and Aspect Astrology. And yes, I do private consultation, and I am mainly a relationship and intimacy astrologer, but I interpret all types of charts under the sun. And I'll be back super soon with more super cool videos. Bye.